This is Michael Reed Dimmock, and you are listening to Flipping the Table, a podcast featuring honest conversations about food, farming, and the future. We do this because, according to scientists, agriculture and food are the most destructive human activities on the planet, driving global warming, mass extinction, malnutrition, obesity, and rural poverty. I am inspired by the movement underway to fix the root causes of the problems in food and agriculture. Thousands of farmers and ranchers, scientists, food entrepreneurs, activists, and policymakers across the nation and globe are making positive changes. This podcast is about these people and their actions to make the planet and our communities more resilient. By flipping the table, we seek the truth about what works so that listeners can double down in support of those people, companies, and products that make agriculture and food part of the many needed 21st century solutions. Meat is political. Whether you embrace or reject it, meat remains on the table for 90 to 95% of the world population. I was surprised to learn from a 2014 National Geographic article on the future of food, which referenced the UN Food and Agriculture Program data, that back in 2012, the residents of Hong Kong had the highest percentage of calories from meat at 29%, followed by Argentina at 19% and Vietnam at 18%. The U.S. was surprisingly low on the list at 13%, but still above the global average of caloric intake from meat, which was about 9%. Presumably, the global rate is higher as more people climb out of poverty, and the USDA reports that in 2018, American meat consumption hit an all-time per capita high of 222.2 pounds per person. Despite meat's affirmed place on the plates of the world, its challenges are real and must be addressed. Critics attack meat producers and meat eaters for their contributions to animal cruelty, pollution of water and air, destruction of the climate, the clogging of arteries, and high rates of cancer and obesity. Attacks on meat can be found any day of the week in mainstream and social media. Yet there are serious and, I believe, credible counter-arguments that support meat production and consumption, albeit with varying degrees of qualification related to how that meat is produced. Today, we engage one of the nation's leading advocates for meat consumption, Anya Fernald, co-founder and CEO of Belcampo Meat Company based in California. Her company is dedicated to delivery of meat that is compassionately and sustainably raised on a farm at the base of Mount Shasta in Northern California. Our topic: the future of meat, and what kind of production system is appropriate for the 21st century. Named one of the top 100 female founders by Inc. magazine, Anya Fernald began her protein path with a Watson Fellowship that allowed her to sojourn through the Mediterranean coasts of North Africa and Sicily as an itinerant cheesemaker and marketer at the turn of the millennium. That led her to a key role within the slow food movement based in Piemonte region of northern Italy. She returned to the Bay Area in 2005 and quickly became a key force in the good food movement. She led the team that mounted the September 2008 Slow Food Nation event in San Francisco, which marked a moment of great transition in how the media covered food systems and the efforts to change it. She followed that watershed event by launching a consulting group, Live Culture, that aided food producers to create quality brands. It was through Live Culture that she came to develop the business plan for what became Belcampo Meat Company. Todd Robinson, the sole investor behind Belcampo, hired Anya in 2012 to build the company and the brand. Her burgers and cookbook, Home Cooked, win awards, and the media, including The New Yorker, have featured her story and mission. Welcome, Anya. Please share with us a description of Belcampo Meat Company, because it is a unique and visionary company designed to break new ground in the meat sector.
Belcampo is revolutionizing meat production for the wellness of people, planet, and animals, in short.
Mm-hmm. So, describe how it works, because you are farm to table,
100%.
Retail table. So describe that system.
So when I say we're revolutionizing meat production for the wellness of people, planet, and animals, I'll break it up in the different sectors and how it's different by kind of who we're addressing. So first off, with people. Americans are given a black box about our meat, right? We're encouraged to trust agri-industry about safety, additives, compliance, and sourcing, right? Trust us.
And animal welfare.
Have you ever seen a package of any type of protein in a Trader Joe's or most Whole Foods? I mean, that's any sort of value-added thing that can tell you what farm it came from or even what region it came from. You used to be able to look in the back when they still had the labeling laws and see meat in this package came from Mexico, Uruguay, and somewhere else, right? That's even gone now. So the way that we're revolutionizing it for the well-being of people is by having transparent sourcing. Now that sourcing is all from our own 27,000-acre organic farm in Northern California. I'm proud that we've just done our first supply deal with another farm in Minnesota for about half of our poultry needs for next year. And we've actually certified them to Belcampo's production standards. So that's really a future path for us, is to create bigger change by not just limiting ourselves to our own acreage, but take our practices and philosophy and work with other farms to leverage the Belcampo brand to commercialize their products that then are produced in our guidelines, which is a path that many brands have followed. But in our case, I think it's particularly meaningful because I love being able to take the muscle of the Belcampo brand and use it to support a network of farmers in the future. So in terms of how we are revolutionizing this for people, we're opening the box. We provide full, transparent sourcing. And that's the true disruption of what Belcampo does. It's not the sexiest part of what we do, broadly. It's not the part that people necessarily think of as a unique thing. But if you look at what's the biggest difference from Belcampo to the other options, it's really that transparency. The other areas where we're revolutionary in terms of planet and animals, let's start with planet, our practices for farming are carbon positive for cattle farming, which is a real point of pride for me. We're not the only ones that are like that. Everybody that practices good, responsible, regenerative farming is in that category. But I think particularly in a cultural moment when many people are choosing to become vegan because of the perceived carbon footprint of beef, I want to raise my hand and say it doesn't have to be that way. You can eat meat, spend more, but you don't have to give up meat to be a responsible citizen, right? And so in terms of how we help the planet, it's really through regenerative practices that actually contribute to the wellness of the environment through animal husbandry. How we contribute to the wellness of animals, and what's revolutionary about that is all of our production system, and I'll call this out saying that everything Belcampo does, many other small farms do. We're not the only ones doing it. We're the only ones doing it at this scale and with this level of transparency. But we focus on diet, mating, and child rearing. How do we put those three elements of an animal's life into the most evolutionarily coherent practice possible? So how do we give beef a diet that's most similar to how beef evolved? How do we give mama cows an experience for child rearing that's most similar to how they evolved, right? So it's about creating systems that are ecologically coherent because they align with how animals were designed to live. So what that means in terms of stats is that our beef, depending on the season, have anywhere between 2 and 10 acres per animal compared to, I think it's like 15 square feet in a feedlot. Our pigs are at 30 square feet per animal. They're free range, they're rooting, they're playing. I mean, it sounds like a joke sometimes to talk about the importance of play, but pigs are super smart and super playful. And you see the pig that's running around and engaging and chasing and digging and rooting. And those are all major factors to increasing quality of life. And they're part of how that animal evolved to exist. Putting them in confinement where they're actually caged so they can't even roll over and potentially hurt their babies is why they do it in confinement farms, but it's the exact opposite, being raised entirely on concrete, surrounded by their own feces, in plants that are so toxic. They've shown, the Pew Charitable Trust, this amazing study where they showed that were the air vent systems to break in a hoop house, in a conventional, like how 99% of pigs and chickens are raised, You have 9 minutes to evacuate everything living, or everything living will die.
Yeah.
In that hoop house, 9 minutes. That's how toxic the environment is and how powerful those damn fans are. It's kind of incredible, right? So that's, in terms of the wellness of animals, that's another really big point of pride, is we're raising them extensively. You know, we host camps all summer long at our farm, and people come up there and they're like, can't believe you're raising animals here. It's like we have 3,000 beef surrounding them, and it smells incredible. And it's amazing to give people a taste of how farming can be, you know, and that's all. It's a win-win. It smells better, it looks better, tastes better, and animals are a lot happier.
So it's an integrated system. It's biologically integrated. It sounds like it's socially integrated in the sense that you're connecting people to the farm through the meat camps that you hold, and the business is growing. So why don't you talk now about the retail portion of the business, and actually the processing and retailing portion of the business too, because I mean, I look at a lot of different food and farming companies, and this is probably the most complex company I've ever seen in terms of the levels of complexity that come from all the different pieces of the chain. So why don't you talk about the processing, and then we'll get into the retail.
Sure. So we built our own USDA certified slaughterhouse, and that's where we actually kill and cut all of our own animals, and we produce all of our value-added products. Value-added products, things like hot dogs and hamburger patties, stuff like that. The processing plant's a 22,000 square foot USDA certified, organic certified slaughterhouse. In short, it's unique because its size, it's rather small. We, in a really busy day, can process, I think, the hypothetical maximum capacity is 60 beef. We typically do about 40 on a big day. Compare that to big plants in Central California that I think do somewhere around 1,000 an hour. That's what I've heard is a top number for a really efficient big processing plant. So you're talking just infinitesimally smaller, right? So what does that do for the animal and the people involved? It allows people to take more time, be more careful, cautious, pay attention, be thoughtful in their work. And it also, I think, just reduces the amount of avoidable error, right? Because we're allowing people to work at a human pace. And we also don't mechanize as much of it, which also, if you think about killing and cutting, less mechanization is definitely going to create greater attention and, I think, humane, a greater environment for humane handling. Our plant is certified humane by Certified Humane. And we also, you know, the processes were defined by Temple Grandin. There's not too much to say about it. I mean,
For people who don't know, Temple Grandin is like the animal behaviorist that has helped to change a lot of production systems to be more humane, right? Exactly. She's famous. Movies have been made about her, books written. Yeah.
So it's been that processing plant I've learned, I mean, every week there's some emergency that teaches me why nobody has opened a new USDA plant in many, many years. This is the first new one certified in California in 50 years that we opened. And I've actually been in conversations with the USDA where they've told me that it would be a lot easier for them if we didn't exist. And a lot of their behavior towards me and our company suggests that they would actively enjoy it if we didn't exist. I feel like there's been a particularly punitive approach.
And is that because you think they're getting pressure from large industry, or is it their systems are built for large industry and don't apply to you, and therefore they have all kinds of hassles?
The latter. 100% the latter. I don't think there's anybody who's personally vindictive. It's interesting to me culturally. I think about this in my own life because I've always been interested in agriculture, and I thought about going to Cal Poly or Davis, looked at those schools for the ag programs when I was graduating high school, and I was like, God, I don't want to do this. This is awful, right? And I knew that farming didn't look like it did in the universities back in the 90s, right? And I look at the USDA inspectors, and that's the whole generation of USDAs all really come from those conventional big ag backgrounds. So you just see people that from a personal lifestyle perspective have no awareness of the fact that some Americans are interested in eating offal. We've had USDA inspectors condemn all of our chicken hearts and livers for 6-8 months at a time because they're like, people shouldn't even be eating this. This is disgusting. So there's a cultural issue.
Oh my God, that's shocking to me.
But there's nothing we can do.
They think it should go to cat food or something?
They're just like, this isn't designed for human consumption. This isn't, they think that we're making it up that we can sell it to people.
Oh my God.
So there's a cultural gap. We have the issue where we got into a bunch of trouble 6 months ago because they were you can't call this merguez and not. How do we know what merguez is? It needs to be merguez sausage, that kind of thing, where that's just a cultural gap where merguez, it's a type of sausage, it's implicit, right? So, and that's not meaning to be like a snob about it, but I just notice a real cultural void, a cultural gap where people from the USDA all the time, when we kind of banter and talk to them, and it's like, they would never eat. All the guys that I've talked to, I ask them, like, how do you like your steak? And always well done. They're really bought into the system, which is like, hey, let's produce meat to a standard and then cook the heck out of it. Let's encourage Americans to use their home ovens as a food sanitation device. That's the mentality. And nobody would ever articulate it that way, and I don't want to get in trouble. But it's really a pervasive attitude. So I'd say there's a cultural gap between my company and the USDA. It's also probably exacerbated by the community that I'm in, because we're in far northern California, so our regulation district isn't. I think if I had like the hipper district, like in the Bay Area or something, might be different. But I certainly wouldn't want to operate a slaughterhouse in the Bay Area for a bunch of other reasons.
Right.
But that's been a huge challenge area for me. But it's also like everything. It's a really amazing opportunity for growth. And I can say that now, having been through hell and high water in the past 12 months. I just passed my 5-year inspection milestone. That provoked a whole bunch of additional regulation because they kind of give you a grace period right when you open. And then we just had a lot of challenges in the past year that we grew from and learned from. And now I'm finally, after my 6th year, able to finally launch my whole muscle charcuterie program, which has been a really big point of pride for me, something I've been nurturing as a passion project for a long time. And it's cool to kind of have grown up enough to be able to do it legally, legit. We're producing copas in our own plant now. And that's something that I was told it was impossible for forever before,
Wow.
So there's so it's been challenging. It's frustrating to feel like the attitude is not one of gracious encouragement with the USDA.
Yeah, I was going to say that's the hard part. The discouraging piece is that we're in a place where agriculture has to innovate in order to capture the value because the cost of productions are going up, right? There are all kinds of challenges for food producers. So you're adding value, and the system isn't really supporting your innovation or supporting the speed at which you need to innovate in order to be successful in today's economy. So that is frustrating. And at the same time, you started by talking about the fact that the company is revolutionary. So revolutions are painful. You are causing, you're a thorn in the side of the USDA, but also they're learning, right? So it is important to see how that goes on. And I'm hoping that there are other farming and ranching companies around the country who are with you trying to cause innovation, pushing on the system. That would be a hopeful sign. I do want to ask you about the cultural difference that you're describing, where Americans have sort of lost touch with how meat products used to be produced, and they've gotten into this industrial mindset. Is it hard for you to hire people that can actually work in that plant and deliver what you're seeking? Yes,
that's the biggest challenge. It's also the area that we're in isn't rich in meat processing plants in Siskiyou County. I think we're the only one. So it's just finding it's a real skill set. So that's super challenging. And then retention. You're asking people to be highly skilled and attentive to detail in an industry where everybody has been de-skilled. So even people who come into it from meat processing backgrounds were a very different model. It's similar to farming. When you think about how, let's say, a typical beef feedlot operator, right? What are they doing? They're putting, and granted, there's a lot of math involved, there's a lot of forecasting and planning, but they're putting a controlled calorie substance into a bucket that a controlled animal puts its head into, right? The risk factors there are not environmental, they're not farming related, right?
They're factory.
The cost of that corn can vary. You have to find a cheap supplement for fiber, or you probably need to pay attention to probiotics. There's things you're paying attention to as an operator. In my farming operation, if you're you're basically growing seasonal greens for your cattle to feed. They have to hit their nutritional benchmarks with something that's seasonal, native, biodiverse, growing out of the ground. So there's like 12 months of work into every bite that goes there, and there's massive factors beyond our control.
Right.
So
it's super complex.
It's hyper skilled. And then everything from, the irrigation systems. We're a small farm on a bunch of different categories of land. We have wheel lines, and We have pivots. We have some sophisticated irrigation systems, but some are not very sophisticated, and it would never make sense financially to upgrade them. So you're talking about, we have a 4-person irrigation team that just drives around and fixes things, right? So there's just a massive amount of complexity and know-how and real attention, and it's the opposite. It's like a reskilled, right? So we're operating in places that have been categories that have been totally de-skilled, and we're reskilling them.
Well, this raises something that I've been thinking a lot about, which is kind of a new green economy, new Green Deal that you hear everyone talking about it. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is talking about it at the federal level. Reinvestment in rural regions for job creation along the lines of what you're talking about, because the industrialization system dumbed down the workforce because machines and systems take over. What you're talking about is really a knowledge set that's much deeper and more sophisticated, and therefore you have to have a higher level of understanding about biology, about mechanics, about all kinds of stuff. I mean, it's actually quite exciting to me to hear about the complexity and the skill levels that you're seeking, the difficulty of hiring, but the opportunity it offers to the future of rural regions. I mean, imagine if, there were lots of operations like yours around the country. You would be employing a whole new level of young people with a deep knowledge.
And we're also now, I think we actively support about 15 farms in our region, between contract growing oats, contract growing hay. We're beginning to outsource some of our pig fattening operations. So those are all relationships with local farms. So we're also becoming a real player in the regional rural economy.
That's
so
fantastic.
Not just the Belcampo W-2s, but the whole broader group of small family
ecosystem. You're creating an ecosystem.
Yeah, it's a positive
economic ecosystem. So that's fabulous. So let's. I may want to come back to this, but let's move on now to the retail operation. So you're building this sophisticated farming system to produce how many different animals coming off the farms?
7.
7. Okay, and then you're taking them to the plants and you're slaughtering, and you're breaking them, and then you're sending them where, and describe that whole nother level of operation.
So we ship out from our plant 2 times a week with palletized orders for every store. So each one of our retail operations gets about 2 pallets twice a week. And that includes everything from bone broth to hot dogs to raw meats. Then that's received by our stores and goes into our kitchens and butcher shops. We're just now moving into a new category of fulfillment as well. We're opening a few commissary kitchens just to serve our online food delivery services like Caviar and Grubhub, E24. So we're opening some commissary kitchens that will just be handling basically ground beef. We're also launching a shop-in-shop concept with a premium retailer in Southern California that's also just going to be like 2 feet of their merchandisers is all stocked with our stuff. So those will be a new area of our network. We have a couple wholesale accounts like Chateau Marmont. It's a big wholesale account for us where we ship as well out of our stores. So we have our own retail distribution network. Then we have refrigerated and frozen warehouses in Northern and Southern California for back ordering, so that we've got an extra batch of chickens and hot dogs and our key items in case we have a run on any one item, which happens every couple of weeks. So we backfill out of those regional hubs. But
how many? So you said 7 species. What are they? Just so people know.
Beef, chicken, pork, lamb, turkey, goose, duck.
Okay, great. Thanks. So all those are available. Whole animal. Not whole animal, but obviously poultry and you didn't say rabbit.
I used to have rabbits and goats. I used to have 9 species.
But too hard.
There was a point, Michael, when I just realized it wasn't my fight to teach America to eat rabbit.
Yeah.
Or goat. It just like there's a certain point, same thing with shank sandwiches and stuff like that. I did that in the early years, and then I just realized it's like, Anya, you're fighting a bigger fight, which is about getting people to think about meat differently. Don't fall into that hipster niche where it's all about like, no, trust me, you're going to love head cheese. It's you just got to try it once. It's like, no, I'm going to leave that to other folks to fight that fight.
Right.
But the other issue with rabbits, and might be too granular, but I know you've got a very educated and ag-aware audience. The rabbits were always the part of the farm tour. Now, granted, I had the first USDA-inspected USDA organic and certified free-range rabbit operation in the United States.
Wow.
And my production costs were like $100 a rabbit because rabbits are super domesticated. They're one of the oldest domesticated species. So you put them outdoors in an environment like Shasta,
and they get eaten.
and there's just like it's like a snack bar for predators. So it was, and that doesn't feel very humane. Just like tying up small animals and leaving them to be devastated by predators. So that was part of it. So then we moved them indoors, and then you have all these bunnies in cages, and it just felt like. And that's
right.
all the big rabbit. I mean, people should know that. I used to love rabbit. I used to eat a lot of rabbit, braised rabbit, chicken fried rabbit. I have great experiences with those dishes. But when I actually got into the business of raising them at scale, it's all caged. And it didn't feel like something I could feel good about. Then when I did it free range, it didn't feel good for other reasons because of the predation issues. So after I looked at all that together, it's like, I actually don't feel good about this as a domesticated species. There's not a way that I can feel confident. And that's just for Belcampo, that integrity, it pulls through everything we do, and that's actually when I look back at those decisions. The goat one was purely about consumer demand. The consumer demand is just not there for goat among our customer base.
Which is too bad because goat is delicious in my view. I love
It's
goat.
great. It's great. And my daughter still is like, when are you going to grow goat again? She loves goat. But she, she's an outlier. You're an outlier. And in a butcher case and in a retail environment, it looks exactly like lamb. So people don't understand. But with rabbits, that's an example of us making a decision that I felt really good about from an integrity perspective. And that's been a really cool development for us, is being able to stand by, growing and evolving as a brand, and having those choices one by one feel extremely defensible. It's like you don't have to, and I think that's one of the reasons that we're emerging as successful in the space, is that we're flexible and we're not going to be dogmatic. Like we've had a lot of great examples of running after opportunities. We were the first people to do bone broth in California. Now we are one of the bone broth leaders in the state and nationwide. And that was just like, hey, there's this opportunity, there's this guy doing it in New York, let's try it. And so we're really flexible and fluid. As long as it fits into our paradigm for a high integrity choice that aligns with our values, we're going to run for it.
Okay. So talk about the meat shops and the restaurants.
Okay. So our restaurants are about 70% revenue, and the meat shops are 30%. Within the restaurants, about half of our gross revenue is burgers and steak frites. So we're really a burger and steak frite restaurant. Although we have an amazing chicken cutlet lately. You should try it at lunch. But we just became well known for our burgers. Very simple setup for the burger. Just we have great beef, so it just tastes amazing. And the restaurants, they've evolved a lot. Initially, the business plan was that it was going to be 50-50 between restaurant and butcher shop, and the restaurant was like a little sandwich shop. Well, what I learned is that our customer base wanted more. They wanted more luxury. They wanted the touch and feel of the brand to be a little fancier. So that first shop that I opened in Marin, we evolved that after a couple of years. And then my second restaurant in Santa Monica is definitely a real step up in terms of luxury, and our Oakland restaurant's in that same vein. Actually, all of our restaurants moving forward, and my next opening is in March in New York at Hudson Yards. That's also it's fast, it's fine fast. It's not a sit down white tablecloth restaurant, but people are eating expensive steak. They're eating a $16 burger. We have $9 burgers as well, but the $16 burger is what people come in and sit down for, and they want it to be nice. So we evolved our brand again there in terms of the whole touch and feel of the restaurant to really feel more upscale, and that's been really successful for us. So now we're really, though, the great thing has been to move away from our chef-driven concept. We have some great chefs in the company, but we're focused just on delivering excellent, comfortable, delicious food that just tastes great, and you can feel super good about the ingredients.
Well, this is interesting because I remember when the whole grass-fed thing started, 15 years ago, whatever it was. The big challenge when I was buying quarters and halves from Mac Magruder was all that burger, and it sounds like the restaurants have evolved to a place where you don't have that problem because you're selling so much burger.
Yeah, and then we also do some partnerships. We're just launching in the next couple of months with Stone Brewing Company. We're going to be doing all their burgers. So we're finding a couple really line partnerships. We still have extra grind. We still occasionally liquidate it on the wholesale market. So we're looking forward to getting away from that problem. The bigger issue for me, the limiting factor, is really steaks. But absolutely, the burgers, 90% of the beef is burger. 90%. Yeah. So that's a lot of burger to move. Last year, I processed, I think, 900 beef total. I think this year it's double that, close to 2,000 that we're processing, something in that zone. So it's a lot of burger. So we can sell all the steaks, and so selling the burger is key.
So tell us, just so our listeners know where the restaurants are.
Sure. Marin, Oakland. We're opening in San Mateo in June of 2019. Those are our 3 NorCal ones. We currently have locations in San Francisco and Palo Alto. Palo Alto is moving to the San Mateo location. In San Francisco, I'm moving it to one of the commercial kitchens because the operating costs are so high for front of house there. So San Francisco is becoming a virtual kitchen, basically, so you can order online. So our locations end of 2019 will be, again, Larkspur at the Marin Country Mart, Oakland and Jack London Square, and then San Mateo at the Hillsdale Mall. In Southern California, I am in Santa Monica, on West 3rd, and then at the Grand Central Market in DTLA.
Right. And then you're going to open in New York, you said March. And then do you have plans for other restaurants in the future?
We're looking at lease deals actively. The great thing now is Belcampo really has become a halo effect brand. So we're getting way better deals. I mean, man, it was tough there for a couple of years starting out and just being like, we're this California organic farm, we want to open a restaurant. And everyone's like,
sure.
Yeah, good luck. So now it's amazing to be pursued by all these really top name brokers and realtors. And I mean, developers now are coming after us. We're getting our first significant build-out deals, which is just great. Just limited our capital exposure. So taking us 6 years of hard work to earn that, but it's a much better position to be in. So you can expect more in the premier flagship type locations. We're looking actively in Northern California, Southern California. We'd be open to more New York options, and we're also considering DC, Atlanta, and Chicago.
I think DC would be a great place because it gives you a chance to influence people there, which is an important place to influence given what you talked about with the USDA. I mean, these are the kinds of, that's the thing I'm really interested in is how do you change the system? And one of the things that I think we should talk about now as we move into this is changing tastes in America. As I said at the beginning, food is political. You've touched on many of the reasons that it is. I mean, you mentioned climate change, you mentioned animal welfare, but we haven't really talked about health that much. But we know people are more interested. So I want to just talk about the number of people who are critical about meat. Do you think the current percentage of vegetarians will increase from what is probably less than 3% in the world today? I've been surprised by that low number. Wikipedia says less than 3% of the population in the world. Only 375 million vegetarians in the world, according to Wikipedia. I'm curious if you think that's true. And the other interesting thing is USDA just reported that in 2018, the United States hit its highest level of per capita meat consumption ever, 222.9 pounds.
That's amazingly surprising to me.
Yeah, me too. But so talk to me about where you think the future of the meat consumer is going, and I want to get into...
Oh man, I mean, you look at Instagram now, it's all about protein. So the health, I mean, actually when we've spent the past 6 months in a really deep dive into our consumer base, and that whole messaging around being this, focusing on a revolutionary play, right, has actually been supported by our customer interviews and engagement. What they've told us, number one, though, is that their motivation for shopping with us and for spending the extra 30% that it costs to shop at Belcampo is personal health. So we started out much more culinary. It was like, this tastes way better. Make the best pork braise you've ever made. Make the best, everything you make with us tastes better if you're a passionate home cook. Well, people don't cook that much anymore, and that's my hobby and passion, but I don't share that with too many people. And so it's like, great, let's be flexible. And that's where things like bone broth and lots more value-added products and a greater focus on the restaurants came out. And actually, our restaurant menus increasingly have evolved for people who are shopping with us and eating 2 or 3 times a week, which is it's not a huge percentage of our revenue, but it's a big part of our brand. But a lot of people who come in on the regular 2 or 3 times a week because of health. So that's personal health and how personal health aligns with protein needs is a huge trend paleo has definitely crested, keto's on the rise. In general, I don't see carbohydrates making a big comeback anytime soon. And the educated, affluent consumer is looking for premium proteins. It makes sense, though. 99% of our DNA is shared with these animals. You talk about a chicken that's fed on antibiotics and growing in 2 weeks to the weight that it takes on Belcampo's farm to grow. It takes 10 weeks, right? 5 times as fast. What's going to happen when you put that in your body, human? It's just a no-brainer that there's going to be that I think that the effects of obesity and unhealthiness around that we see. Basically what we market and sell in America is obese animals. Animals that are critically overweight for their life, that have gone through a rapidly compressed adolescence and sexual maturity due to a highly refined toxic diet. And their bodies are in a massive inflammatory response.
Right.
That's how you put it in a modern way of talking about health, is that these guys all have chronic inflammatory diseases.
Right.
And they've gone through a premature puberty. So it's like a worst case scenario for animal health. if you were to map that on, that's like your obese 9-year-old girl who got her period 2 years earlier.
Right.
And that's all over America, by the way.
Right.
Right?
And you see why.
So there's a real correlation to human health in that, right? And it's kind of terrifying, I think, to ruminate on that. But I think a lot of smart people are looking around and being like, this doesn't make sense to put this in my body if I want to live to the age I want to live at. And, personally in my own company, I've seen a number of guys, this is just by happenstance of who I'm interacting with, but men in their early 30s who've had health crises due to, our culinarians in our company, people typically who love to enjoy life and eat food and drink, and guys being told when they're 35 that they will have 5 years to live if they continue with their current practices. I've met 2 people in the past 2 months with that same story, and it's like, this is, that's why they come to work for Belcampo. It's like they're going through a personal health change. It's not just like, oh, I want to look better and feel better. It's actually like, no, if I continue down this path, I'm going to die in my 40s. That's how bad some of these health trends are. So I see there being a massive shift. Sadly, there's not enough of a connection. All this stuff is still so in the, I call it like the bullshit zone of science, where it's like a spectrum right now where you're talking about nutritional advice, and then you're looking at it, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, it's a new moon, so eat potatoes. Like there's like so much crazy out there too. Mm-hmm. But some of the stuff that's surfacing around clean eating is pretty valid. And some of the personal narratives about overcoming things that are obviously, environmentally related diseases, things like MS and rheumatoid arthritis and diet and diabetes and irreversible cases of diabetes that are reversed in like 6 months. Mm-hmm. And the first line in those stories is always like, my doctor told me I had to get on X, Y, and Z medicine. And I started looking online and I started doing X, Y, and Z, and now I don't need medicine, right? We've all read those stories. And it's interesting that there's not any kind of like concerted approach in the health community, in the official medical community to think more comprehensively about diet. But I think smart people are putting the dots together and saying, hey, to avoid chronic disease, I need to get really careful about what I put in my body.
Yeah, that raises another interesting point about systems change, because you have a medical system that really makes its money off treatment. So there's not an incentive to prevent. Diet is the first place you should be thinking about if you're looking for prevention. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot, and I know a lot of people are, is how do we put the focus on diet and improve diet as a means to lower our healthcare costs in the long run. So what you're saying is that really underneath it all, according to your clients and what you're learning, is that more and more people are looking at meat, healthy meat, as one of the legs in a stool of good diet,
Absolutely.
Healthy protein.
And I do think, I personally abstain from meat a couple of days a week. I see some of the hyper protein. I want to put it out there. I'm not like the crazy. I don't think it's good.
The paleo.
Well, paleo can be. It's how you interpret it. But there's definitely over. That protein solves all ills. I think it's like everything. Elimination diets help us reduce calories, right? Fundamentally, a lot of this is about reducing calories. Most of the modern American diet doesn't facilitate reducing calories. Plus, it's also toxic, right? Mm-hmm. But I think that these, elimination-based diets, the fact that many of them are protein-centric is great for my brand and business. But broadly, when people are choosing to eat less and eat better, it's a good thing for companies like mine. It's a good thing for farming, quality farming.
So let's since we're on this topic, I'm interested in what you think about. What are your thoughts on laboratory-grown meats or vegetable-based meat alternatives? Do you think they're going to become established, expand over the years? I'm curious about what you think about that, because you read about them all the time. You hear the CEOs and founders talking, the investment bankers. Lab meats. What do you think?
So, I love the fact that they're marketing aggressively about how bad conventional meat is. I think it's terrific. That's a really good thing for the whole movement. 99.9% of meat is toxic, and when I'm out and about in the world and can't get my product or a similar product, I eat vegan. I was in LA last week and not near one of my restaurants, and just went to hit a vegan cafe, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I do that all the time when I'm traveling, and it's like I'm never going to eat meat if it's not the kind of quality that I want to put in my body. That said, I'm also never going to eat a hyper-processed, carbohydrate-based, genetically modified meat substitute, right? That's just another kind of no-brainer to me. So I'd say from a messaging perspective, I think they're spot on in identifying that there's need to be a shift, right? I think the miss in the lab meats currently is how hyper-processed they are and reliant on highly modified inputs. I think that there's a miss for the consumer in that, because I think the consumer that's attentive to the issues that they're surfacing is also attentive to ingredient quality. And reading out the processes of Impossible and Beyond Meat and stuff, I just don't want to eat that. It's just too many. Any of those highly extracted, it's genetically modified or no. It's just the level of processing. So I feel like it's actually kind of a big ag play, and I think it's part of the reason that it's getting blown up so much in the media. It's a way for big ag to continue to play in the demise of industrial agriculture.
I was going to say, it's an industrial system.
Yeah, it's like a way to continue the status quo.
Right.
So I think the reason it's getting a lot of love is it's also being backed. I don't know if it's like implicit or explicit by big, because that's a perfect type of thing for like an ADM to come in and run. It's a hell of a lot easier than doing something like Belcampo. Right. Because there you have an infinitely scalable, commodity-based, highly modified, genetically modified product.
Yeah,
awesome.
It's like building computers.
That answers the question of meat's bad. So it's an industrial solution to the current problem, and I think it's going to have the same health impacts in the long run of the current problem.
Well, the other thing that for me that I've always had doubts about is, particularly when I listen to the investors who are involved, it's reductive science, because what they're thinking about is just the nutrition piece. And they've forgotten about the fact that animals have a role in the ecological system, that there was a coevolution between grasslands and hoofed animals. That whole piece gets left out of the conversation. And I'm always wondering, even people that are talking about we shouldn't eat meat, and people who attack ranchers, I'm like, do they not understand the biological system in which we live? I'm always curious about that piece of it not being included. Any thoughts on that?
The criticism of meat from those new lab meat industries, to me, the example I give is like saying you can get from point A to point B riding a bicycle or in a Hummer, right? They're both legitimate ways to get from point A to point B. Conflating the two and saying, okay, well, there are equivalent impacts on the environment is just obviously doesn't make sense, right? That's exactly what people are doing when they're conflating industrial ag with grass-fed and free-range animals. So I don't even worry about that. I think smart people figure that out. Like 15 million gallons of water per animal. Like, yeah, that's raising corn to feed them, which doesn't make sense for a lot of reasons. So I don't even look at that comparison as being legitimate, and I think that people understand that or who seek out that information. But yeah, it's frustrating. It's just it's a simple conflation.
Well, actually, that what you just said reminds me of something. Yesterday I was watching a morning political talk show, and Elise Jordan, who's a Republican strategist and former speechwriter for Condoleezza Rice, said on television in the morning, big ag and factory farms had to be addressed because of their environmental impacts and inhumane treatment of animals. This surprised me. She's a Republican, a conservative, has a conservative vision of the world. But I was surprised but pleased because, well, also she's in her 30s, so she's of that next demographic who I think is more attuned to these issues. But what it raised for me is that kind of, I bring this up because of what you said. I think there is an awareness. People that are thinking are saying the industrial food system is not working. So let's talk about what you think is in the future. 30 years from now, the mid-century, when climate change is really biting us, we really feel it. What do you think is going to evolve in terms of the production of meat in this country?
Well, the double-edged side of the sword right now is that climate change hurts highly industrialized production systems more than diverse traditional systems. It wipes out monocultures faster than permacultures. Why? Because there's deep-rooted biodiverse root systems. Literally roots, right? In things like the pastures on our farms.
Yeah, biodiverse is resilient.
So if you look at what's going to happen, I think that you're going to see massive crop failures, for example. Flooding in the Midwest. Didn't happen the past 2 years, but the 2 years before that, there were incredible floods and commodity prices spiked, right? So as you see more and more of that, you're going to have a break in the subsidy system because it's not going to be sustainable you're going to have a massive, you're going to see meat prices skyrocket from the commodity system. I think the commodity system could become more expensive, or at least on par with the current system. So I think climate change is going to be more detrimental for the agro-industrial system than for what's considered now the alternative. I think about it like an ATV versus a Ferrari. Like a Ferrari can go very fast, but on a very narrow set of parameters, like a certain type of road, right? Mm-hmm. An ATV can always go the same speed, but kind of anywhere. And that's really an analogy for what our type of farmer can do. We have a heavy rain year, we grow more grass, there's mud, but nothing floods. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that's just nature of, like, we don't have catchment ponds. We don't have, we don't have irrigation systems. It's a simpler system. Mm-hmm. So the break points it's easier to fix.
What about drought, though? I mean, I remember a few years ago I was up at the ranch when you were in the middle of the drought.
Yeah.
And it was kind of a crisis.
Oh, gosh, yes.
Yeah, talk about that. Just talk about that, because I think that is a reality for grass-fed operations as well.
Sure. I mean, drought is challenging for us. At the time, that was really bad timing for the drought because we just started. So now we have more lease relationships, so we're able to lease more land further away, and we do that now to mitigate our risk. So, and also in the future, we'd like to be contracting with a couple different growers in different regions of the country. So in the last drought, we ended up kind of getting out of that by shipping animals to Colorado and New Mexico. And then we would do that a lot sooner in the next drought. So I think we learned a lot through that. But yeah, drought, I mean, the El Nino, La Nina cycles are now shorter and less extreme, right? So instead of a 10-year massive El Nino, La Nina cycle, we're now on 3 or 4 year short cycles. And there's going to be more droughts and more wet years and more years like this that are sort of between the two, where we had a really bad rain year through October, which actually cost us a good amount of money. And then we got the fires at the very end, and the rains came in. I mean, there's that, everybody's followed that in California, but that's going to be a more typical pattern.
Yeah, do you worry about fire? I mean, you guys are you're in the wildlands up there on the edge of a forest.
Yeah, definitely.
So do you have a strategy of creating buffer strips or something to protect you from fire?
Mm-hmm. We do a lot of that. And also we are really actively managing the rangeland around our farm. So we take our sheep up into all of our wooded hillsides to manage all the undergrowth there. I mean, we'd love to probably in the future do controlled burn as well, because that's really the best way to manage for fire. That's how everybody managed wildlands. Now that's not culturally approved, because controlled burns are very risky in this environment. But, our farm director, James Ricker, is 5th generation. He said, yeah, that's everything. My grandfather still did. Everybody used to do controlled burns in California. That's how you manage for fire. It's just part of farming. And that's completely disappeared from the culture.
Native Americans did that.
Everybody.
Right.
So, but we manage for it now by just really being careful about undergrowth and trimming out. So, but yeah, absolutely. But, we don't have dense urban structures. It's pasture, and if it burned, it would be rough. We'd lose a season. But it's it's definitely a risk, right? And we're managing for it. But it's not. It's sort of part of the broader perspective for Belcampo of operating farmland in multiple regions.
So let's get back to this idea of the future. So you think that I just want to go a little deeper. So you think, and I think I'd probably agree that by the middle of the century, the big current industrial systems are going to be under more pressure from climate change. And it may not just be climate change. It's going to be consumer choice, water pollution, if there's a carbon tax, there could be implications for fertilizer prices, all kinds of stuff, right? So do you actually believe that there will be a multiplication spread across the landscape of ranches and farms like yours?
Absolutely, yeah. I think that more and more consumers want this in different communities. I mean, the butcher shop business is a challenging one. I like it, what it does for our brand in terms of the look and feel of the brand, and when you walk into our store seeing that, but it's a very challenging business to manage. But I am tracking that across the country, small butcher shops are opening up in smaller communities. And that's interesting to me. Like I just saw one open up in Detroit with a great operation with supporting a lot of small local farmers. And I just see these popping up all over the place, San Diego, Santa Cruz, and I don't see that as a threat. It's like, welcome to it. I mean, butcher shop business is not something I want to expand into too much. Restaurants are more, a less risky bet for us. But I'm heartened by that just as an early flag of consumer demand. And those are small lifestyle businesses, but that to me, 10%, 20%, 50% of those survive, and you start to build a regional economy again for the type of product that we can offer. Because Belcampo is offering at a pretty big scale, pretty niche product. There's really no other operations at scale offering this quality of product. And we could, as Belcampo, plug into a big national retailer potentially. But you look at most of the small operations, they just can't play in that space. They can't produce enough boxes of New York steaks to ever get into like a Safeway or a Vons. They could never compete on price. So the direct marketing, the consumer demand that these small butcher shops, to me, is indicating is something that's going to continue to grow.
And do you think that are you going back to this idea of rural, the challenges in rural communities? So I remember when you first opened the plant, there was plans to actually provide service to some of the other ranchers who are doing grass-fed stuff in your region. Is that still happening, where people can come slaughter? And is that business growing for you, or is it kind of steady?
It's steady. We'd like it to grow. It's probably, I think it's like 30% of our current operations in the slaughterhouse. But there's not a thriving small-scale direct-to-consumer market in our region. It's not like Sonoma, where there's a lot of farmers markets where a guy with some hustle can get coolers packed and get to a farmer's market and make some money selling meat. In Siskiyou County, you'd have to drive a really long way, like 5 or 6 hours, right? So there's not many people who are willing, because then you drive to the market, you get there and it's raining that day and you sell $200 of meat maybe, right? So it's a challenging market to make it in for direct-to-consumer. But yeah, it's part of what we do. It's also part of the philosophy of what we do, 100%.
So, talking, as you know, I think we've been working on the Small Poultry Producer Protection Act for California to help small poultry producers slaughter on farm, because it's basically very hard to do right now with anyone but your family members helping you slaughter. So, one of the things that's clear in our research around that is that there aren't enough slaughter facilities in the state of California. And I was just in New Mexico, and I talked to grass-fed ranchers in Santa Fe. I went to the farmers market there, and they're hauling their animals all the way up into Colorado to pull them back down to Santa Fe because they have no slaughter facilities. So I'm just curious about what you think. I mean, you know what it takes to build a slaughter facility of your scale. Do you think that we could imagine a world in which slaughter facilities became like utilities, where the government actually built them and leased them to ranchers in order to allow more of that localized production?
I mean, government getting more involved is not something that's going to ever make sense to me, based on my dealings so far with the USDA.
Because the challenge.
Yeah, just not understanding small-scale production. I mean, the slaughterhouses get blamed a lot for not existing, and that's why we don't have local meat. I think it's backwards. I think the demand hasn't been there. We were talking earlier, 90% of the beef is burgers. You go to a butcher shop, or you go to your Whole Foods or your Safeway, look at the meat case. What's in it? Like one little container of ground beef, and then there's New Yorks and fillets and ribeyes and beautiful steaks. It's like at least 2/3, 4/5 of the case is steak, right? So like 10% of the animal is 80% of the case. Issue is we don't eat enough ground beef and offcuts and offal to make those small plants work. So I think it's on the consumer, if there really is a burgeoning consumer demand, but then that also relies on consumers cooking more, because you can't just make all the burgers, you got to braise stuff too and make stews and things like that people don't really cook anymore. Right? So I think that the slaughterhouses went out of business not because of nefarious big ag being bad. I think consumer taste changed. We decided that it was way more fun to throw a steak on a grill than to sit around and sear little cubes of meat and then wait 3 hours and then let it sit a day and then eat it. We're not France. So I think it's a consumer issue. Really.
That's interesting.
Consumer issue. And I don't agree with the perspective that, I mean, if we had I mean, you see a couple slaughterhouses that open and fail. It's challenging to make them work financially. There's not enough demand. Because especially for beef, chicken and pork are a little different. But for beef, to get a slaughterhouse up and running and operational, and it's also, you have to have a really robust local market for all cuts of meat.
And that's the hardest part.
Yeah. Maybe do it in some really groovy community. But it's really challenging to imagine. Now, pork is different. Poultry is definitely different. But there are also really small margins. I mean, slaughterhouse prices are super low. It's like $105, $107 to knock a beef. In the standard market, we charge a little more than that. But think about the effort and waste and rendering and all the stuff that goes into killing animals, like $100. It's a lot of work for $100.
I know.
Then you charge more for cutting it and refrigerating it. And it ends up being more than that all in. But it's a pretty low margin business. And actually, even the big operators also drive the price down really significantly.
Right. Yeah, the big, huge plants, right? But then, talking to the poultry producers, you have to have a certain number of birds to get into the plants. There's like 3 plants in California, and if you don't have enough birds, you can't get in.
Yeah.
So, it's a challenge. It's hard to imagine how to fix this problem. But what you're saying, it's really up to the consumer. Consumer demand has to rise. So it sounds like, I cook because I love to cook, so I cook 4 days a week. But a lot of people, I think, cook on the weekends now as entertainment. It's not really part of their lifestyle, except for that it's entertainment. It's not something you feel they need to do. So what I think I hear you saying is that in the future, more people are going to eat out more or buy prepared foods more, and that the way to deal with burger is really get it into those prepared foods in those restaurants, and that any hope of a grass-fed revolution or a pastured animal revolution is going to be dependent upon restaurants and food service, not home cooking. Yeah. Well, that could be true. I mean, even in Europe, people eat out a lot. I mean, it's true. In France, people eat out all the time. That's why there's so many restaurants on the street, right? Yeah. So maybe it's just a maturation of the culture, but it is a curious challenge. So I think I'll end with this last question, which is a question we ask everybody. If you had, superpowers, what would you change to transform the meat sector of our food system? What if there was one thing or a couple things you could do? What would you do?
I think changing or encouraging consumers to spend a little more time thinking about it. It's a really big responsibility as a human that an animal lives and dies so you can eat. So thinking about the choice of what that means and how you want that animal to live and die. We've been really coached to, that I was surprised. I have 2 little kids, and any food that's geared towards children, it used to just be for kids' food, but now it's adults' food too. It doesn't look like any animal part. Everything's really denaturalized. So fish sticks are square, and chicken nuggets are fingers, and nothing even looks like the shape of an animal, right? And so I feel like we've been desensitized, and we no longer make the through line of our choices back to an animal living and dying so you could eat that food. So thinking about increasing that small amount of bandwidth that the consumer has for their engagement and interest in that decision and that purchasing choice, that would be magical for me. Just opening that door a little bit to say, look in there and just reflect on that, contemplate that choice, and how do you want that choice to live on in the world? How do you want to show up in that animal's life? It sounds like a very new agey, but just a little bit more mental energy around the impact of that choice.
Yeah, I like that. It's an ethical answer. It's not a industrial answer or even a business answer. What you're saying is really you're asking people to open their minds and more deeply understand the system. So yeah, I think it's a great way to end this. Thank you very much, Anya.
Thank you,
it was a pleasure.
That
yeah.
was fun.
You have been listening to Flipping the Table, a podcast about food, farming, and the future. Flipping the Table is hosted by me, Michael Reed Dimmock, and produced by Patrick Sexton. Our production colleague is Doris Meyer. Our sponsors include Roots of Change and the Public Health Institute. If you have questions, comments, suggestions, or would like to sponsor Flipping the Table, please email us at comments@flippingthetable.com. at fthetable.com. That's comments at fthetable.com. Thank you for listening.